Hey viewers, my name's Cara. I'm your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we're talking about death. And as my partner said, you mean like the fun death, right? Like the changey kind from the tarot? And I said, no, we're actually talking about like real death, like dying. So this week is about our views on death and the afterlife, and this was inspired by some much older posts of ours from the collab, where I think back in 2009, 2010, like right in the first year or so of the collab, we had a lot of people asking about things related to death. So we just took a whole month and we called it Death Month. And we talked about various things related to death, the afterlife, funerary practices and rites, stuff like that. And so you can see all of those old videos from the previous collab members and what they posted back then. I am the only remaining member from then, so you can still see my videos, and all of the other ones will be people who are not currently on the collab anymore. So you'll be hearing new views from everyone else this week. I'll try to keep mine short since it's not really new. And we've also covered funerary practices and funeral rites very recently, like last fall, I believe. So I will link to that video of mine if I can find it real quick. The topic this week, though, is from David, who said, because it was such an old post of yours, death and or the afterlife, reincarnation, etc. How do you see it? How do you get to the end place, i.e. underworld, heaven, or hell, or whatever you happen to call it? Death rites, rites of passage into the afterlife. Anything else you want to say is okay. These are just some ideas. The main thing was death and your view and or belief. So, I have talked about this before, I believe, in the past, but my views have only solidified further or evolved more over the years. So, we'll see what I have to say right now. So, I believe in reincarnation. I would almost rather say I believe in the reality of reincarnation, because for me that has come to the forefront as being pretty much the reality of how existence works, how I've come to see it. But I don't want to say that, because I also believe that whatever happens to people when they die is, I like to believe that whatever they believed would happen is what's going to happen to them when they die. So, and we could talk about ghosts and spirits and all kinds of things, because I do believe in the spirit world, in the spirit realm. I think that certain energy signatures can stick around for a while. People who have chosen not to pass on may stay around here for whatever reason. But for the most part, I believe in reincarnation because I have a very cyclical worldview as far as a cyclical view of life. So a cyclical view of death makes sense to me. It just fits in what my worldview is. I believe in previous lifetimes, simultaneous lifetimes, and I am going to get really nerdy for a second in the very modern sense, in that I am a Whovian. I am a fan of Doctor Who, and I love the way that they explain how time works. So this is where people, you're going to make fun of me, because those of you who don't watch the show or maybe aren't fans of the show are going to be like, that's a TV show, Cara. Like, okay, you're confusing TV with reality now. That's not really how things work. I don't really care. I like the way that they explain it, and it makes sense to me, and the way that I interact with the world and the experiences that I've had with previous lifetimes, simultaneous lifetimes, connecting with them. So it makes sense to me. So if you are a fan of the show, you know what I'm going to say. If you are not, you may have heard this through just people in the culture who are Whovians. You may have heard this quote about time not really being a linear progression from point A to point B, but really being more of a big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. So the idea behind that is that time is not linear. Time does not just go from this moment straight through to this moment on to this moment and that's it, but really time doubles back on itself and overlaps itself, and things that are happening at different moments in time chronologically on a timeline, so like me now and someone who we see as being alive centuries and centuries ago as far as a chronological timeline, that those moments are both simultaneously happening right now somewhere in time. Okay? So the idea, so I have come within the past year or so to try to catch myself. We talk about past lives all the time because we consider them being lives that have happened before, times that we have lived before now. And we think of them as being chronologically in the past. So years that came before 2017, chronologically in the past as far as a timeline. But I have come to understand that it is possible that our souls have been incarnated in times previous to the time that we are consciously living now that may have happened chronologically in the future from when we are now. And it's also possible that we are living simultaneous lifetimes elsewhere on other planes at the same moment, or in reality, I guess the real view of simultaneous lifetimes, which is something that I've only really recently come to learn about, is that everything is all happening right now. That everything really is just now. And we are here, here is now, now is forever, right, Bren? So I love that, and that's really something that has become more prevalent to me as I have done more work with attempting to connect with my other lifetimes. So I say previous lifetimes because I believe that my soul experienced them either simultaneously, is experiencing them now, or previously experienced them to the time that I incarnated in this body in this lifetime. But they may have happened in the chronological future, they may have happened in the chronological past, but they were previous to the lifetime that I'm living now. So that's why I try to say previous lifetimes, or when we talk about simultaneous lifetimes. Because I have had experiences where, you do a past life regression, right? You're supposed to go back on your personal soul's timeline, and that's something also in Doctor Who. The Doctor cannot double back on his own personal timeline. He can travel all throughout time and space, but you can't go back in your own timeline. So it still makes sense in that regard. But trying to connect with other lifetimes that my soul has previously experienced, and at least one of them at one point didn't feel like a different lifetime to me. It felt like something that was happening right now, like it could have been happening in the next town over. It could have been happening right across the country. It was very modern, very now. So I was very confused by it, and I thought, maybe I did it wrong, but that was before I learned about simultaneous lifetimes, that maybe I was seeing into a simultaneous lifetime that my soul is experiencing somewhere else right here, right now on this planet, which is just kind of cool, right? So I know not everyone believes that, but so that's an evolution that my beliefs have taken, that I'm learning more about, and I'm actually doing more with my previous lifetimes, my other lifetimes, whereas in the past when I've talked about these things, I wasn't really exploring that. As far as my view of reincarnation, I have said in the past that I think that the way I think about reincarnation is a little different than some people think about it, and I was always going to make another video about it but never got around to it. So here's pretty much what I think I meant by that. I haven't thought about it in a long time, but I think this is what I was going to say, which is that a lot of people believe that because the idea of reincarnation is that our soul reincarnates over and over until we learn the lessons that we're supposed to learn, and then we reach the end place, whatever the end place is. and when your soul's done. Like when you've learned all the lessons, you're done, and you just keep reincarnating until you learn those lessons, and then you reach a completion point, right? You graduate from the life cycle course, and you're done. And most people believe that because you're learning a lesson every time, that each subsequent lifetime you are improving. So if you, in your first lifetime, if you were an amoeba, for example, and your next lifetime you were a plant, and then your next lifetime you were a bigger plant, maybe you're like a tree, and in your next lifetime maybe you were a bird or a tree-dwelling animal, and in your next lifetime you were slightly higher on the food chain, maybe you were a predator, and then in the following lifetime, then finally you were a human, and then in that lifetime you didn't learn all your lessons, so you reincarnated as a human again and again and again, but that you always go up the food chain, so to speak. That's a way that I've heard a lot of people describe it, where they think, like, you know, if you're incarnated as a human now, that you will never go back into being incarnated as an animal, for example. So I have never really agreed with that, and now I think I have a little bit better languaging to help myself explain why I think I've had that view forever. And it's because, like, you know, thinking about it now, I can say this, whereas I don't think I ever had this specific thought before. So that's what I mean. Like, I knew I didn't agree with it, but I couldn't tell you why. So now I am hearing myself talk about it. I'm saying, well, yeah, that doesn't make sense, because that is assuming and implying that animals are lesser developed souls than human beings. And as someone who, you know, I consider myself an animist in many ways, that I believe there is soul and energy and life energy in all beings and all kinds of things, even that you may not refer to as beings. But, you know, saying that if you were a plant before means you, or if you're a human now, then you can never go back to being an animal, and you definitely can't go back to being a non-animal being, implies that those things are less evolved energy than what we are now. And I just don't believe that at all for a minute. So I do believe that you could, in your soul's next lifetime, you could be an animal again, a non-human animal, I should specify, because we are animals, a non-human animal, or that you could be a plant, or you know, whatever. I believe that your soul reincarnates into whatever it needs to reincarnate into to learn whatever lesson is coming up for you at the time. And being a human might just not cut it all the time. You might have to go back and be a wombat, or, you know, an ant, whatever. I was looking up some past life regression videos on YouTube a while ago for a friend of mine who wanted a recommendation for a good one, and I found a new one that I hadn't actually ended up watching yet, but I was just reading the comments to see what people were getting out of it, and a lot of people were actually connecting to previous lifetimes where they were plants or animals. I remember one person talking about how they connected to a lifetime where they were a tree, and how peaceful it was, and how solid and connected they felt. There's absolutely a lesson in that. And someone else was saying, like, I was a deer, like, I can't believe I was a deer. Like, that seems so, like, lackluster, like maybe you're hoping for something more extravagant and awesome or whatever, but they were like, I was like a deer in the woods. And at first their comment sounded like they were unhappy with this, but by the end of it they were like, and you know what, it makes a lot of sense, and it like explains a lot. So yeah, no, I believe that you can go anywhere as far as beings or whatever that you incarnate into, because I believe it depends on the lesson. I also, you know, the more I think about it and the more years go by, I don't think I believe that there is an end place. Because my view of reincarnation, you know, the life cycle continues no matter what. The wheel of the year keeps turning. Nobody can stop the turning of the wheel. And the cycle of reincarnation continues also. I don't think at this point that I believe that there's ever a time where we've learned all the lessons and we get to graduate and then we're just done and we never have to incarnate anymore. I am an eternal student, and I believe that we are all always learning. Like, how many times have I said that throughout my videos in the past, 9 years that I've been on YouTube? If you guys all had $1 for every time you've heard me say that, we could all go buy falafel, something. I had falafel today, so that's why I thought of it. But anyway, yeah, so you've heard me say that over and over, and because I believe that, it makes sense to me that our souls are always learning more lessons. There's always more for us to learn, especially if we're reincarnating into different times and different places. Things are so different now than they were in the chronological past, and the chronological future has to be so much more different. So there's different lessons to be learned at different times of life and being. So yeah, it makes sense to me that my soul will just keep learning lessons and keep incarnating. As far as how that relates to the spirit world and whatnot, which I know is not what David asked about, but I know people think about this, and I've been thinking about it a lot as I do more with ancestor work and preparing to talk more about my practices with that, is like, if we believe that spirits have gone on and reincarnated, then or if souls have done that, then are their spirits still hanging out here? When we honor our ancestors, we're not necessitating that their spirit be here to be present. We invite them if they are around, if they want to come help, whatever. We're inviting their energies, the same way that we might invoke deity or elements into our circle. But if we believe that they've reincarnated, then are they still hanging around? Are they still available to be contacted? Can you always contact your ancestors if reincarnation is a thing? Or have they just not been reincarnated and they're still hanging around? Or, third option, is it possible that bits of spirit and consciousness that are connected to people who are still living in a certain time, is it possible that those bits of consciousness still hang out while other bits of consciousness have reincarnated? What? The thing is, we don't really know, right? But I think these are pretty cool questions to answer. And that's all I wanted to cover in this video. I'm looking at my checklist now. Yeah, how we see death in the afterlife, how do we get to the end place, and funeral rites, which I have already covered recently in the past, and I did the original Death Month topics. So that's my updated idea of how I see death and the afterlife experience, the after this current lifetime experience and reincarnation and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I hope that gives you some things to think about, and I hope you have a very happy Samhain, because I won't see you again on this channel until afterwards, but I will be posting some stuff on my personal channel, which is CuteWitch772. And thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you next month. Don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.